The ocean stretched endlessly before her, gilded by the dying light of two suns sinking beneath the horizon. Each wave rolled against the cliff face far below, a muted roar echoing through her bones like the steady pulse of a world that didn't want her anymore. She stood barefoot at the precipice, the wind tugging at her thin lavender wrappings until they fluttered like the ghosts of wings. The salt stung her eyes, though she didn't blink. She'd forgotten what it meant to blink, to need, to ache. Somewhere behind her, a voice broke the rhythm of the wind, soft but human enough to hurt. "You don't have to do this, Aaron." Her name on his lips made her flinch. "Don't follow me, Rylan," she said without turning. "It's already decided." He stopped several paces away, boots grinding against the grit and stone. The air smelled of brine and smoke, the aftermath of burning cities far inland. "Nothing's decided," he said quietly. "You're still here." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Here? I'm not even one thing anymore." She turned slightly, and the fading light caught her skin, shimmering with faint bioluminescent traces that mapped veins across emerald flesh. Her eyes, once clear as obsidian, flickered with the pale glow of energy that wasn't meant for her species. "They fused me with their technology, Rylan. With yours. I'm a failed bridge between two worlds that already hate each other." He shook his head. "You're not a failure. You're proof we could have done better." The wind roared again, nearly drowning his voice, and for a moment she wished it had. Words were harder to fight than weapons. She closed her eyes, feeling the cliff crumble beneath her bare toes. "Do you remember what you told me in the lab?" she asked softly. "When they were cutting me apart for data?" Rylan's breath caught. "I said I wouldn't let them. And you didn't," she said. "You killed them." Her voice trembled, not in fear, but in memory. "You ended the project, destroyed the records, and dragged me out of that place. You called it mercy. But look at me." She spread her arms, the translucent fabric of her garment glowing faintly against her body. "This isn't mercy. It's unfinished cruelty." Rylan took another step forward, careful not to startle her. His armor, dark and scarred from years of war, caught the light in dull silver lines. "You're alive, Aaron," he said. "That's not cruelty." "Alive isn't the same as whole," she whispered. "Alive isn't what I wanted." The sound of her words hollowed the air between them. "They didn't just take my body, they took the silence inside my mind. I hear everything now. The ocean, the metal in the cliffs, the heartbeat of this planet." She pressed a hand to her temple. "It never stops. And it's driving me mad." "Then let me help," he said. "You can't," she answered. "You can't quiet what I've become." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried only the sound of waves and the distant hum of old machinery embedded in the coastline, remnants of the orbital crash that had brought humans here decades ago. Rylan had been a soldier then, barely out of youth, sent to pacify what his commanders called native insurgents. But they weren't insurgents, they were survivors. He'd learned that too late, and Aaron had been the one to show him. He remembered finding her years later in the ruins, half dead, half machine, still beautiful in defiance. Saving her hadn't been strategy. It had been penance. "You once told me," he said, "that hope is a wound that refuses to close." "It still is," she said. "And you're the reason it still bleeds." He stepped closer, his voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "Then let me bleed too." She turned to face him fully now, the last of the sunlight gilding her features. High cheekbones, sharp eyes, a mouth that trembled between anger and sorrow. "Why do you care?" she demanded. "Your people are leaving. The ships are already in orbit. Soon the humans will abandon this world, and I'll be just another broken artifact left behind." He met her gaze without flinching. "Because I stayed." "You should have gone," she said, her tone a knife. "You belong to them." "No," he said. "I belong to the promise I made to you." She faltered, her breath catching. The wind tugged at her hair, casting copper strands against the green of her skin. You promised to fix me, she said bitterly. And you did. You made me this. I promised, he said softly, that I wouldn't let them define what you are. Then who am I? She whispered. Tell me, Rylan. Tell me what's left to save. He took another step forward, close enough now that she could feel the heat of him against her skin. You're Aaron of the coastal clans, he said, voice shaking but sure. You can shape light into sound. You can heal stone with your hands. You're the one who looked at the sky when it burned and said it was still worth painting. His voice cracked. You're everything we forgot to be. Tears stung her eyes, though she hadn't cried since they remade her. You're lying, she said. I'm a weapon that never fired. You're a miracle that never gave up, he countered. Even now, standing on this cliff, you're still fighting. I'm not fighting, she said. I'm surrendering. No, he said quietly, stepping close enough to touch her arm. You're choosing. And that's what makes you free. She froze as his hand brushed her wrist, grounding her with human warmth that pulsed against her skin like memory. For the first time in months, the noise inside her mind softened, fading beneath the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Rylan, she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of his name. He didn't speak. Words would have broken the fragile silence that held them together. The waves crashed harder below, a rhythm older than both their species. The sun sank lower, and shadows stretched across the cliff. For a fleeting moment, she imagined what it would be like to step back, to walk away from the edge instead of forward into it. If I stay, she said at last, what then? What life waits for a ghost and a soldier? Not the one we had, he said, but maybe one we build. Together, she asked. Together, he said. She stared at him, at the scars on his face, the sincerity that refused to die in his eyes. Slowly, she lowered her foot from the precipice. The cliff shuddered beneath them as a gust of wind rose from the sea, carrying the scent of rain and something deeper, change. She stepped back fully, her knees weak, her pulse erratic. Rylan caught her as she stumbled, his arms closing around her with a tenderness that was almost unbearable. For a long time, they just stood there, two survivors of different worlds breathing the same air. The sun vanished beneath the horizon, and the first stars appeared, distant, cold, indifferent. Yet between them, warmth bloomed, fragile but real. You stopped me, she murmured. No, he said softly. You stopped yourself. I just reminded you what your heartbeat sounded like. She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm that once terrified her with its fragility. Night came gently over the cliffs, cloaking them in violet shadow. The wind softened to a whisper, and the ocean's roar became a lullaby. You said once that the stars were the eyes of the dead, Rylan said quietly. Do you think they're watching now? If they are, Aaron said, then maybe they'll see something worth forgiving. He smiled faintly. They already do. She looked up at him, studying his face as though seeing it for the first time. Not the soldier who'd fought her kind, not the man who'd saved her from the lab, but the human who'd refused to stop believing she was more than the sum of what they'd done to her. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it too. Behind them, the first drops of rain began to fall, soft and luminous as liquid stars. She tilted her head back, letting them strike her skin and scatter across the faint lines of her bioluminescence. It's beautiful, she whispered. It always was, he said. She turned to him again, and their hands found each other, not as savior and survivor, but as two broken beings learning how to hold on. The sea continued to breathe below, endless and ancient, while above them the night stretched wide enough to hold their fragile hope. And somewhere in the distance, lightning flickered, soft, uncertain, like the first heartbeat of a world learning how to live again. The dawn came quietly, creeping over the waves like a secret kept too long. Pale gold light touched the cliffs, warming the jagged stones still slick with last night's rain. Aaron stood near the edge again, though this time her feet stayed firmly rooted to the ground. The world smelled clean, washed raw by the storm. Below, the ocean moved with measured calm, no longer the hungry void that had called her. Behind her, she could hear the faint rustle of fabric and the soft metallic click of Rylan checking his gear. He moved like a soldier even in peace, every motion economical, disciplined. "You didn't sleep," he said gently. "Neither did you," she replied without turning. "I'm not the one who almost—" He stopped himself, his voice breaking on the memory. She turned then, her expression soft but weary. "No. You're the one who stopped me." Rylan met her gaze and saw something new there, an exhaustion too deep for words, but beneath it, a fragile steadiness. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I wasn't going to," she said, the corner of her mouth twitching. "Good," he said, smiling faintly. "Because I didn't do it for gratitude." The air between them lightened for a heartbeat, but Aaron's eyes soon drifted toward the horizon again. The rising sun revealed more than beauty, it revealed ruin. The coastal plains beyond the cliffs were scattered with wreckage from the last evacuation wave, half-buried transport pods, scorched metal, and the remains of ships that never reached orbit. "They left everything broken," she murmured. "Even the sky feels hollow now." "Then we fill it," he said simply. "With what?" "With something better than what came before." She looked at him, puzzled by his certainty. "You talk like creation is easy." "It isn't," he said, fastening the last strap on his chest plate. "But it's easier than watching everything end." He reached for the pack near his boots, pulling out a compact device wrapped in cloth. "What's that?" she asked. "A resonance beacon," he said. "Portable version. It can broadcast across the old frequencies. If there are still survivors, human or otherwise, they'll hear it." Her brow furrowed. "You want to call them back?" "I want to remind them they're not alone," he said. She hesitated. "You think they'll come?" "I think some will," he said, looking at her meaningfully. "People follow hope, even when it hurts." They spent the morning setting up camp along the cliffside, using what remained of Rylan's salvaged gear. The beacon hummed quietly as it activated, its pulse merging with the rhythmic crash of waves. Aaron watched him work, his hands steady despite the wind tugging at his hair. She envied that steadiness, that human way of grounding pain in purpose. "You never stop," she said. "If I stop," he answered, "I start thinking too much." "About what?" "About the people we couldn't save. The ones I hurt before I knew better." His voice was low, almost lost beneath the wind. She studied him for a long moment. "You humans carry guilt like armor." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "We wear it because we don't deserve to forget." "And if forgetting is the only way to live?" she asked. "Then it's not living," he said. The day passed in slow rhythm, marked by the hum of the beacon and the sound of the sea. Aaron tried to rest, but sleep never came easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of her kin, the ones who hadn't survived the integration experiments. Their memories lived in her neural threads, flashes of song and sorrow encoded into her blood. She remembered their voices begging for the pain to stop, remembered the silence that followed when it didn't. She'd thought ending herself would end them too, but now she wasn't sure. Maybe survival meant carrying them, not escaping them. "You're thinking again," Rylan said, breaking the quiet as he sat beside her on the rock. "You make that sound like a crime." "Not a crime," he said, "just dangerous." "To who?" "To your peace." She smiled faintly, though the expression didn't reach her eyes. "Peace is a story we tell children to keep them from asking why the world hurts." "Then maybe it's time we told a better story," he said. She looked at him sideways. "You really believe that, don't you? That everything broken can be remade?" "I have to," he said. "Otherwise, what was the point of pulling you off that cliff?" She blinked, her throat tightening. "Maybe the point was mercy." "No," he said quietly. "Mercy ends with survival. What comes next is life." The word hung between them like an open door neither had the courage to step through. The sun dipped lower again, staining the sea in molten orange. She turned to him at last. "Then teach me," she said. Teach me how to live again. That night, under a sky scattered with unfamiliar constellations, he began. He showed her how to build a fire using old solar cells and dry moss, how to tell time by the stars, how to listen for the rhythm of the wind rather than the noise in her mind. In return, she taught him how to feel the earth beneath his feet, the way the energy of the planet pulsed softly if one was still enough to listen. They sat close, the firelight dancing across their faces. You see, he said softly, it's not gone, Aaron. It's just waiting for us to notice. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. In my world, before yours came, we believed the sea remembered every sound, that it kept the echoes of everything ever spoken. Do you think it remembers us? He asked. It will, she said, if we give it something worth keeping. For the first time since the experiments, she laughed. It wasn't loud, it came out quiet, surprised, like something rediscovered. Rylan froze for a heartbeat, then smiled. I didn't think I'd ever hear that again. Neither did I, she said, and her voice trembled. The laughter faded, but the warmth remained. A wind swept through the cliffs, and for a moment the world felt alive again, not healed, but breathing. When the humans leave, she said suddenly, you could still go with them. There's a place for you in orbit, isn't there? There was, he said. Not anymore. Why not? He looked into the fire. Because every time I look up at the stars, I think of how much damage we did getting there. And I think maybe it's time we learned how to stay. The night stretched on, and eventually the two of them sat in silence, watching the horizon glow faintly with the promise of a new dawn. The beacon pulsed behind them, steady and soft. Somewhere out there, its signal traveled across the void, reaching ears that might still be listening. Erin closed her eyes and let the sound wash through her. It wasn't the sterile hum of machines or the torturous resonance of the lab, it was gentler, almost human. When she opened her eyes again, Rylan was watching her. What is it? He asked. I heard something, she said softly. A reply. He blinked. From the beacon? No, she said, shaking her head. From the sea. The following morning, they found the source. A small craft had washed ashore below the cliffs, its hull cracked, its markings alien but familiar. Erin's pulse quickened as they climbed down to investigate. This design, she whispered, tracing a symbol etched into the metal. It's from the Western Archipelago. My people used these before the wars. Rylan crouched beside her, scanning the interior. Looks like it's been drifting for months. There's someone inside, she said, pointing. Beneath shattered glass lay a motionless figure, green-skinned, wrapped in faded cloth. Erin's breath caught. She's one of mine. Rylan's expression tightened. Help me get her out. Together, they pried open the hatch and pulled the survivor free. The woman's pulse was weak, her body cold. Can you save her? He asked. I can try, Erin said, kneeling beside her kin. Hours passed as Erin worked, using the last of her bioluminescent energy to stabilize the stranger's vitals. Rylan watched silently, ready to assist but knowing not to interfere. When it was over, the other woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were pale amber, too familiar. Erin, she whispered. I thought you were dead. Not yet, Erin said softly. And you? We hid. Some of us. The labs were destroyed, but the hunters came later. How many? Dozens, the woman said weakly. But they're coming again. The ones who stayed behind, they want to finish the work. Rylan's jaw clenched. Then we'll be ready. Erin looked at him, uncertain. Rylan. No, he said firmly. I'm not letting anyone turn this world into another experiment. As the sun fell again, Erin stood on the cliffs once more, but this time not to fall. Below her, the rescued woman slept by the fire, and Rylan stood at her side. You saved her, he said. You both did, she replied. Maybe this is what life looks like now, saving what we can. Maybe, he said. But it's a start. The wind carried the scent of rain again, soft and cool. She turned to him, meeting his gaze. You think your beacon will reach others like her? If not, he said, we'll keep sending it until it does. She smiled faintly. Then I suppose we've got work to do. He nodded. Always. And as darkness fell, the two of them stood side by side, the cliff no longer a place of endings but of beginnings. Days turned into a rhythm shaped by wind, sea, and signal. The cliffside had become something of a refuge, half camp, half sanctuary, marked by the hum of Ryland's beacon and the faint bioluminescent glow of Erin's energy traces that pulsed softly through the night. The rescued woman, Sarai, regained strength quickly under Erin's care. Her presence changed the air around them. For the first time in years, Erin wasn't the last of her kind she knew. Yet the reunion wasn't joy, it was fragile, cautious, haunted by the weight of memory. You shouldn't have saved me, Sarai said one morning, her voice a whisper carried by salt wind. They'll come for you now. They were already coming, Erin replied. At least now they'll find me standing. Ryland spent the days reinforcing their shelter and expanding the beacon's range. The signal now reached deep into orbit, a rhythmic pulse of coded light and sound. You're painting a target on us, Sarai warned. Maybe, Ryland said without looking up, tightening a cable. Or maybe I'm painting a path. Erin watched them both, the soldier who wouldn't stop building and the survivor who wouldn't stop fearing. Between them, she felt like something in between, not human enough for one, not alien enough for the other. When did we forget that courage and madness look the same from a distance? She asked quietly. Ryland smiled without humor. About the time we stopped calling it bravery and started calling it survival. At dusk, the sky burned gold and violet, the kind of beauty that came before storms. Erin stood at the cliff's edge again, her gaze scanning the horizon. The waves glimmered with faint metallic sheen, residual pollution from human engines long gone. Your world still bleeds, she murmured. Ryland joined her, his shadow stretching long beside hers. Then we keep cleaning the wounds, he said. One day, maybe it'll stop hurting. Does it ever? She asked. For you. He hesitated. Some nights, he said, when I forget what I've done long enough to fall asleep. She turned toward him, studying his profile lit by the fading sun. You carry ghosts, she said. I built a home for them, he replied softly. They don't haunt me, they remind me what not to become. The beacon's hum deepened suddenly, breaking their moment. Ryland frowned and moved to the console. Signal lock, northwest quadrant, he muttered. That's a ship. Rescue? Sarai asked from behind. No, Erin said, her voice darkening. Pursuit. The display confirmed it, an incoming vessel, small but heavily shielded. Its transponder code bore the mark of the Directorate, the last remnants of the human faction responsible for the integration projects. Ryland's jaw tightened. How did they find us? Because I told them, Sarai said quietly. Both turned to her in shock. You what? Erin demanded. Sarai's eyes shimmered with tears. They have my sister, Erin. They said if I sent a signal, if I gave them you, they'd let her live. And you believed them? Ryland asked, disbelief edging his tone. You don't understand, Sarai cried. They killed everyone else. I couldn't lose her too. For the first time since the experiments, she laughed. It wasn't loud, it came out quiet, surprised, like something rediscovered. Ryland froze for a heartbeat, then smiled. I didn't think I'd ever hear that again. Neither did I, she said, and her voice trembled. The laughter faded, but the warmth remained. A wind swept through the cliffs, and for a moment the world felt alive again, not healed, but breathing. When the humans leave, she said suddenly, you could still go with them. There's a place for you in orbit, isn't there? There was, he said. Not anymore. Why not? He looked into the fire. Because every time I look up at the stars, I think of how much damage we did getting there. And I think maybe it's time we learned how to stay. The night stretched on, and eventually the two of them sat in silence, watching the horizon glow faintly with the promise of a new dawn. The beacon pulsed behind them, steady and soft. Somewhere out there, its signal traveled across the void, reaching ears that might still be listening. Erin closed her eyes and let the sound wash through her. It wasn't the sterile hum of machines or the torturous resonance of the lab, it was gentler, almost human. When she opened her eyes again, Rylan was watching her. "What is it?" he asked. "I heard something," she said softly. A reply. He blinked. "From the beacon?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "From the sea." The following morning, they found the source. A small craft had washed ashore below the cliffs, its hull cracked, its markings alien but familiar. Erin's pulse quickened as they climbed down to investigate. "This design," she whispered, tracing a symbol etched into the metal. "It's from the Western Archipelago. My people used these before the wars." Rylan crouched beside her, scanning the interior. "Looks like it's been drifting for months." "There's someone inside," she said, pointing. Beneath shattered glass lay a motionless figure, green-skinned, wrapped in faded cloth. Erin's breath caught. "She's one of mine." Rylan's expression tightened. "Help me get her out." Together, they pried open the hatch and pulled the survivor free. The woman's pulse was weak, her body cold. "Can you save her?" he asked. "I can try," Erin said, kneeling beside her kin. Hours passed as Erin worked, using the last of her bioluminescent energy to stabilize the stranger's vitals. Rylan watched silently, ready to assist but knowing not to interfere. When it was over, the other woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were pale amber, too familiar. "Erin," she whispered. "I thought you were dead." "Not yet," Erin said softly. "And you?" "We hid. Some of us. The labs were destroyed, but the hunters came later." "How many?" "Dozens," the woman said weakly. "But they're coming again. The ones who stayed behind, they want to finish the work." Rylan's jaw clenched. "Then we'll be ready." Erin looked at him, uncertain. "Rylan." "No," he said firmly. "I'm not letting anyone turn this world into another experiment." As the sun fell again, Erin stood on the cliffs once more, but this time not to fall. Below her, the rescued woman slept by the fire, and Rylan stood at her side. "You saved her," he said. "You both did," she replied. "Maybe this is what life looks like now, saving what we can." "Maybe," he said. "But it's a start." The wind carried the scent of rain again, soft and cool. She turned to him, meeting his gaze. "You think your beacon will reach others like her?" "If not," he said, "we'll keep sending it until it does." She smiled faintly. "Then I suppose we've got work to do." He nodded. "Always." And as darkness fell, the two of them stood side by side, the cliff no longer a place of endings but of beginnings. Days turned into a rhythm shaped by wind, sea, and signal. The cliffside had become something of a refuge, half camp, half sanctuary, marked by the hum of Rylan's beacon and the faint bioluminescent glow of Erin's energy traces that pulsed softly through the night. The rescued woman, Sarai, regained strength quickly under Erin's care. Her presence changed the air around them. For the first time in years, Erin wasn't the last of her kind she knew. Yet the reunion wasn't joy, it was fragile, cautious, haunted by the weight of memory. "You shouldn't have saved me," Sarai said one morning, her voice a whisper carried by salt wind. "They'll come for you now." "They were already coming," Erin replied. "At least now they'll find me standing." Rylan spent the days reinforcing their shelter and expanding the beacon's range. The signal now reached deep into orbit, a rhythmic pulse of coded light and sound. "You're painting a target on us," Sarai warned. "Maybe," Rylan said without looking up, tightening a cable. "Or maybe I'm painting a path." Erin watched them both, the soldier who wouldn't stop building and the survivor who wouldn't stop fearing. Between them, she felt like something in between, not human enough for one, not alien enough for the other. When did we forget that courage and madness look the same from a distance? She asked quietly. Ryland smiled without humor. About the time we stopped calling it bravery and started calling it survival. At dusk, the sky burned gold and violet, the kind of beauty that came before storms. Erin stood at the cliff's edge again, her gaze scanning the horizon. The waves glimmered with faint metallic sheen, residual pollution from human engines long gone. Your world still bleeds, she murmured. Ryland joined her, his shadow stretching long beside hers. Then we keep cleaning the wounds, he said. One day, maybe it'll stop hurting. Does it ever? She asked. For you. He hesitated. Some nights, he said, when I forget what I've done long enough to fall asleep. She turned toward him, studying his profile lit by the fading sun. You carry ghosts, she said. I built a home for them, he replied softly. They don't haunt me, they remind me what not to become. The beacon's hum deepened suddenly, breaking their moment. Ryland frowned and moved to the console. Signal lock, northwest quadrant, he muttered. That's a ship. Rescue? Sarai asked from behind. No, Erin said, her voice darkening. Pursuit. The display confirmed it, an incoming vessel, small but heavily shielded. Its transponder code bore the mark of the Directorate, the last remnants of the human faction responsible for the integration projects. Ryland's jaw tightened. How did they find us? Because I told them, Sarai said quietly. Both turned to her in shock. You what? Erin demanded. Sarai's eyes shimmered with tears. They have my sister, Erin. They said if I sent a signal, if I gave them you, they'd let her live. And you believed them? Ryland asked, disbelief edging his tone. You don't understand, Sarai cried. They killed everyone else. I couldn't lose her too. Erin's pulse pounded in her temples, but beneath the anger, she understood. The Directorate's cruelty had always thrived on desperation. How long until they arrive? She asked. Ryland checked the scanner. Minutes. She looked at Sarai. You should run. I didn't mean, run, she snapped. The woman stumbled back, tears streaming, and fled toward the cliffs below. Erin turned to Ryland. You have to go too. Not a chance, he said, loading his weapon. This isn't your fight. It became mine when they made me part of it, he said. You said once I taught you to live. Let me prove I learned something. She met his eyes and saw it there again, that unbreakable human stubbornness that had both saved and doomed him countless times. Fine, she said. Then we end this together. The ship broke atmosphere with a scream of engines that split the sky. The ground trembled as it descended, its shadow swallowing the cliffs. Erin raised her hands, energy rippling through her veins, her skin flaring gold and green. The air vibrated with power. They'll try to capture you alive, Ryland said. Don't give them that chance. Wasn't planning to, she said. The ship's doors opened, disgorging armored soldiers into the clearing, humans, augmented and faceless beneath dark visors. The leader stepped forward, voice amplified through a mask. Erin of the hybrid line, he declared. By order of the Directorate, you are to be reclaimed. She smiled coldly. You already tried that. I didn't like the hospitality. Then die with your mistake, he said, raising his weapon. Not today, Ryland muttered and opened fire. The battlefield erupted in light and thunder. Plasma bolts seared the air, exploding against rock. Ryland moved like a shadow, his precision born of years in war. Erin was not subtle. She unleashed waves of resonance that distorted gravity itself, throwing soldiers into the sea. The air shimmered around her, alive with sound and fury. Ryland, she shouted. Left flank. He turned just in time, firing through the advancing soldiers. The two moved in perfect sync, man and alien, logic and instinct, survival and defiance. But the enemy kept coming. Erin's energy began to wane, the glow beneath her skin flickering. They're absorbing my frequency, she gasped. Adaptive shields, Ryland said. They learned. Then they'll unlearn, she hissed. She reached deep inside herself, to the part that still carried the echoes of others, the voices of the fallen hybrids. You are not alone. The whisper rose inside her mind, building into a chorus. Her veins burned, her pulse becoming a storm. She released the energy in a single pulse that cracked the sky open. The wave slammed into the enemy line, shattering shields, frying circuits, and turning metal to dust. When the light faded, only silence remained. The ship trembled, alarms blaring. Ryland staggered, half blind from the flash. Erin, he called. She stood in the center of the devastation, smoke curling from her skin, her breath ragged. I'm here, she said, though her voice was barely audible. The enemy vessel listed heavily, engines sparking. Ryland holstered his weapon and moved toward her. We have to go, he said. That blast'll trigger a core detonation. She shook her head weakly. You go. I can't move. The hell you can't, he said, pulling her arm over his shoulder. You're not dying here. You can't carry both of us, she murmured. Watch me. He dragged her through the collapsing wreckage as explosions tore the cliffs apart. The sea below raged, swallowing debris. Behind them, the ship's reactor imploded, sending a shockwave of molten air across the ridge. They dove as the blast hit, tumbling down a slope of shattered stone until everything went dark. When Ryland woke, the world was quiet except for the whisper of the tide. He tasted salt and blood, his head throbbing. Erin, he rasped, pushing himself upright. She lay a few meters away, motionless, her skin dimmed to a faint emerald hue. He crawled to her, heart pounding. No, he whispered. Don't you dare. Her chest rose, slow, weak, but steady. Relief crashed over him. You stubborn thing, he said, his voice breaking. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. Still here, she whispered. You're welcome, he said, half laughing, half crying. She reached up, fingers brushing his cheek. You saved me again. That's getting to be a habit, he said. You'll have to start returning the favor. By the time the sun rose, the sea had calmed. The wreckage had vanished beneath the waves, leaving only the sound of gulls and the smell of smoke. Sarai returned hesitantly, her expression full of guilt. I'm sorry, she said. Erin looked at her for a long moment, then shook her head. Don't be. Just don't let them use you again. Sarai nodded, tears in her eyes. They won't. She glanced at Ryland. What now? He looked toward the horizon. Now we rebuild. You think others will come? Erin asked. They already are, he said, pointing. In the distance, faint trails of light crossed the sky, signals answering the beacon's call. Erin watched them, awe softening her exhaustion. Then we stay, she said quietly, until the sky learns our names. That night, as the stars shimmered over the sea, Ryland repaired the beacon one last time. Erin sat nearby, her reflection rippling in the water below. You could have left, she said softly. When the fighting started. And miss watching you blow up half the directorate, he said with a grin. She smiled faintly. You're impossible. So are you, he said. That's why it works. The beacon's pulse synced with the waves, steady and strong. What will you do, she asked, when the world finally stops needing saving? He looked at her, the firelight painting warmth into his scars. Maybe then, he said, I'll learn how to live instead of fight. She tilted her head. And me. You already started, he said. The day you stepped back from the edge. The days following the battle settled into something that almost resembled peace. The sea washed the cliffs clean of the wreckage, carrying the twisted remnants of the Directorate ship into the deep where even memory could not follow. The air, once sharp with the scent of smoke, smelled now of salt and rain. Erin stood each morning where the land met the edge of the world, her bare feet sinking into the cool stone. She could still hear faint echoes of the energy pulse she'd unleashed. rippling through the fabric of the planet's resonance like a heartbeat rediscovering its rhythm. The destruction she had caused had not scarred the world, it had awakened it. Birds had returned to the cliffs, nesting in the fractured ledges, and for the first time in her memory, the sea no longer sounded angry. "You're listening again," Ryland said softly from behind her. "It listens back now," she replied. Ryland had begun to change too, though not in ways visible to the eye. The hardness that had once defined him, the soldier's armor that no uniform could hide, had softened. He no longer moved with the vigilance of a man expecting an ambush, but with the quiet confidence of someone learning to breathe. He spent his days maintaining the beacon, refining its signal to strengthen connections across the world. The response network had grown, small bands of survivors, hybrids and humans alike, answering the call with cautious hope. "They're building something inland," he told her one afternoon, showing her a transmission display. "A settlement. They call it Haven's Reach." "A fitting name," she said. "You think we should join them?" "Eventually," he said. "When you're ready." She smiled faintly. "Always my choice." "Always," he said. "That's the rule." Sarai stayed with them for a time, though she carried the weight of her betrayal like a wound that would not close. Aaron didn't speak of it again. Forgiveness, she had learned, was not spoken but lived. Sarai helped mend what she could, repairing solar grids, tending to the crops that grew stubbornly in the poor soil. Some evenings, she sang the old songs of their people, the ones that survived the silence of the labs. Her voice, fragile but pure, drifted across the waves, mingling with the hum of the beacon. "That sound," Ryland said once, "it feels like remembering." "It's older than remembering," Aaron said. "It's what memory wishes it could be." They sat by the fire that night without speaking further. Words often felt unnecessary now. The rhythm of existence had become its own language. But peace, like the tide, could not hold forever. One night, the beacon emitted a pulse unlike any before, a sharp, discordant tone that rattled the air. Ryland rushed to the console. "Something's wrong," he muttered. "It's not a transmission. It's interference." "From where?" Aaron asked. "Everywhere." The display flickered, then stabilized into a single message, simple, chilling. "The sky remembers." Aaron's heart stuttered. "It's them," she whispered. "The Directorate." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Worse. It's the architects." Ryland frowned. "The ones who made the integration tech." "The ones who made everything," she said. "The technology, the resonance field, the experiments. The Directorate was only their shadow. The real creators never died, they waited." The beacon pulsed again, and across the night sky, lights began to appear, descending, silent, deliberate. "They've come back," she said. The first vessel broke through the clouds like a falling star, its hull gleaming with mirrored light. It didn't crash, it hovered, immense and graceful, defying gravity with disdain. Ryland grabbed his rifle, but Aaron stopped him. "Weapons won't matter," she said. "They built this world's bones." The air shimmered as figures emerged from the light, neither human nor alien but something between, a fusion of biology and design so seamless it was terrifying. Their leader stepped forward, its form fluid, face smooth and androgynous. When it spoke, the voice carried through vibration rather than sound. "Hybrid prototype Aaron. Directive incomplete." She felt the words inside her mind like a blade. "You left me to die," she said aloud. "You were not terminated. You were evolving. You call that evolution?" Ryland snapped. "You tortured her." The entity turned to him, expressionless. Correction. She was perfected. The resonance in Aaron's veins flared like fire. "Why return now?" she demanded. "To finish integration." The entity's hand rose, and light poured from its palm, surrounding her in a lattice of shimmering energy. Her body convulsed, the air humming with violent frequency. "Aaron!" Ryland shouted, lunging forward, but the field threw him back. "You can't stop it," the entity said without speaking. "She is the bridge." Her mind contains the key to unifying all forms. Erin fell to her knees, the glow beneath her skin pulsing wildly. For a heartbeat, she saw everything, the networks of resonance crisscrossing the planet, the fractured signals of survivors, the beacon's heartbeat merging with hers. She realized what the architects wanted wasn't her, they wanted connection without conscience. Control disguised as harmony. With a scream that shook the air, she forced the resonance back against the field. The energy shattered like glass, light spraying across the cliffs. The architect reeled, momentarily stunned. Rylan was at her side in an instant, pulling her to her feet. "You good. I will be," she gasped. The entity straightened, its perfect composure cracking. "Resistance is regression." "No," Erin said, voice steadying. "Resistance is freedom." She reached out, her hand glowing gold. The energy surged again, not in anger this time but in empathy, an open pulse that connected her to every living thing still bound to the resonance network. Across the world, beacons answered her call. Their lights flared, synchronizing into a single, breathtaking wave that arced into the sky. The architects faltered. Their forms flickered, destabilized by the unexpected feedback. "You can't control what feels," Erin said, her voice carrying through the resonance field itself. "You built this to dominate. I rebuilt it to remember." The energy crescendoed, blinding in its intensity. The architect's ship trembled, its light fracturing into fragments that dissipated into the atmosphere like dust caught in wind. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The sky went still. Erin collapsed, her glow fading to a dim ember. Rylan caught her before she hit the ground. "You're out of your mind," he whispered. "You just challenged gods." She smiled weakly. "They weren't gods," she said. "Just creators who forgot what they made was alive." 4 hours after, the night remained unnaturally quiet. Sarai tended to Erin's wounds while Rylan kept watch. "You think they're gone?" he asked. "For now," Erin said. "But they'll come again. Then we'll be ready," he said. She looked at him, exhaustion etched into her every feature. "We can't keep fighting forever, Rylan." "Maybe not forever," he said softly. "Just long enough for someone else to know how." He brushed a strand of her hair from her face, his hand trembling slightly. "You said once that peace was a story. Maybe this is how we write it." She leaned into his touch, eyes half closed. "Then write it well," she murmured. "The world's listening." When dawn came, it brought silence, but it wasn't empty. It was waiting. The beacon still hummed softly, its rhythm steady. Across the sea, faint lights blinked, signals from other survivors, other worlds waking to the same truth. Erin stood again at the edge of the cliff where it had all begun. The ocean below glowed faintly gold where the architect's light had dissolved, as though the sea itself had absorbed their arrogance and turned it into something beautiful. Rylan joined her, his steps quiet on the stone. "Back where it started," he said. "Maybe where it ends too," she said. "No," he replied. "Where it begins again." She looked at him, then smiled. "Always the optimist." "Someone has to be," he said. "You're too busy saving creation." She laughed softly, the sound blending with the wind. "Maybe creation doesn't need saving," she said. "Maybe it just needed to be seen." They stood together as the sun rose higher, painting the sea in liquid fire. For once, Erin didn't look at the drop below. She looked at the horizon, the space between light and water where possibility lived. "What now?" she asked quietly. "Now," Rylan said, smiling. "We live." And somewhere beyond the waves, the echoes of the world answered them back, carrying the resonance of one truth that would outlast both their species, that even at the edge of all things, compassion could still pull the universe back from the fall. The seasons changed slowly along the coast. What had once been barren stone was now softened by moss and wildflowers, the air carrying the scent of salt and renewal. The cliff that had nearly claimed Erin's life had become the center of a new beginning, a gathering place for those who had survived the wars, the experiments, the collapse of the old empires. Wooden structures rose among the rocks, bound by metal and song, their architecture a blend of human pragmatism and alien grace. Children, some with bright green eyes, some with pale human skin, and some with both, ran between the beams, their laughter carried by the wind. Erin stood above them, her gaze distant but calm. She had become something she never intended to be, a living legend whispered through transmission waves and campfire stories. The woman who stood at the edge and chose life. Rylan watched her from below, leaning against a rail he'd built himself. His hands were rougher now, scarred not by battle but by work. "They think you're a goddess," he said when she joined him. "I told them I was a fool," she replied. "Fools are easier to believe in than gods," he said with a smile. "At least fools bleed." She laughed quietly, the sound full of warmth. "And yet you're still here, following one. Someone has to make sure you don't decide cliffs are fashionable again." "I make no promises," she said, leaning beside him. The sea below shimmered, reflecting the afternoon light. "Do you ever wonder if this is what they meant to create?" she asked softly. "The architects?" "Yes. A world where the lines blur. Where human and alien become one." "If it is," he said, "then they made it wrong. Because they wanted control." He turned to her. "You made it right. Because you chose connection." Their settlement, which others had begun calling Haven's Edge, had become a symbol across the fractured world. Ships arrived weekly now. Pilots, refugees, wanderers drawn by the beacon's promise. They came with broken machines and broken hearts, and the people of the cliffs taught them how to mend both. Rylan trained the young to craft, repair, and protect. Erin taught them to listen, to the hum of the earth, to the silence between the waves, to the stories carried by the wind. She never claimed leadership, yet everyone turned to her when fear crept in. "They follow you," Rylan said one evening as they walked among the lantern-lit paths. "They follow hope," she said. "I just remind them what it sounds like." "That's what leaders do," he said. "Not in my world," she replied. "In mine, leaders were the ones who spoke loudest. Hope was the one who listened." The world beyond their shores was changing, too. Reports came in through the growing resonance network, cities rebuilt, new councils forming, experiments banned, the last directorate cells dissolving into history. But with every gain came shadow. The architect's disappearance had left behind relics, dormant technologies that whispered of power. Some factions wanted to revive them. Others feared what sleeping gods might still remember. "It'll start again," Rylan said one night as they stood by the old beacon, now converted into a lighthouse. "Another war. Another reason to forget everything we learned." "Then we remind them," Erin said. "Every time they forget, we begin again." "You make it sound easy," he said. "It isn't," she replied. "But neither is falling." She looked out across the sea, where faint lights blinked on the horizon, ships returning, carrying traders and travelers. Among them were emissaries from distant continents, seeking counsel from the one they called the Voice of Two Suns. Erin hated the title, but she understood its purpose. Symbols gave people direction, even when truth was quieter. One of the ships docked at the bay below, and from it emerged a young girl with copper eyes and a metal brace on her leg. She approached Erin with trembling hands. "They said you could fix things," the girl whispered. "Machines. People." Erin knelt to her level, smiling gently. "Sometimes," she said. "Show me what's broken." The girl hesitated, then pointed to her chest. "It hums too loud," she said. Erin placed her palm over the child's heart and closed her eyes. Beneath the rhythm of flesh, she heard the faint echo of resonance, unbalanced, wild. "It's not broken," Erin said softly. "It's just learning how to be strong." The girl's eyes widened. "Like you." "Stronger," Erin said. Rylan watched the exchange from a distance, pride mingling with awe. Every time he thought he understood her, she became something larger. Not in power, but in depth. She was less a miracle now and more a truth, quiet, steady, undeniable. That night, when the settlement slept, he found her sitting alone by the cliff where they had first met. "You never stop coming here," he said. "I don't want to forget what almost happened," she said. "If I forget the edge, I forget the choice." He sat beside her, the moonlight silvering his hair. "You ever regret it?" Stepping back, she shook her head slowly. "Regret is for what's lost. I found something instead." "What's that?" "You," she said simply. He smiled, eyes glinting. "You always did ruin my solitude." A breeze swept through the night, carrying the distant sound of waves colliding with rock. "The architects will come again," Rylan said eventually. "Maybe not in our lifetime, but they'll return. Creation always wants to rewrite itself." "Then let them," Aaron said. "This time, we'll greet them with open hands, not weapons. Maybe they'll learn what it means to build without fear." He chuckled. "You really believe they can change?" "I have to," she said. "Because if I don't believe they can, then what was the point of believing we could?" He leaned back, watching the stars shimmer above them. "You've got an answer for everything." "No," she said, smiling faintly. "Just the questions I can survive." Years passed, as years must. The settlement grew into a city, its towers alive with living metal that pulsed softly at night. The resonance network connected continents, species, and hearts. The world healed not through conquest but conversation. And in time, the humans who had fled began to return, not as conquerors, but as wanderers seeking home. Erin grew older, though her kind aged differently. Her glow dimmed to a soft shimmer, and her once fiery energy became the steady warmth of a dying star. Rylan aged more visibly, his hair silver, his movements slower, but his eyes, those stubborn human eyes, never lost their light. "You should rest," she told him one evening as they watched the children train by the cliffs. "I'll rest when the sea does," he said. "Then you'll be awake forever," she teased. "Guess I'll have good company," he said. The final night came softly, without storm or sorrow. Rylan sat by the fire, his breathing shallow but peaceful. Erin sat beside him, her hand intertwined with his. "We did it," he whispered. "We built something worth staying for." "We built each other," she said. "The rest was just foundation." His eyes drifted to the stars above. "Do you hear it?" "What?" "The sea. It's humming again." She smiled. "It remembers you." "Good," he said faintly. "I told it to." His grip loosened. She held it a while longer, then pressed her forehead to his. "You pulled me back from the edge," she whispered. "Now it's my turn." And when the last breath left him, the wind carried it out to sea, where it joined the eternal rhythm of the waves. After the funeral, the people built a monument, not to Rylan alone, but to the choice they had made together. A sculpture of two figures standing side by side, facing the horizon. Erin spent her final years near it, teaching, guiding, and sometimes simply watching the ocean. On the day she finally left, she walked alone to the cliff's edge, the same place where it had all begun. The sun dipped low, the waves whispered her name, and she smiled. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said softly. The wind rose, wrapping around her like an embrace. Her bioluminescence flared one last time, brilliant as dawn, before fading into the golden light. When the settlers came looking, they found only a shimmer in the air and a faint hum beneath the stone. Centuries later, the people of Haven's Edge still tell the story. They say that if you stand at the cliff during sunset and listen closely, you can hear two voices in the wind, one steady, one soft, woven together like heartbeat and tide. And sometimes, when the sky burns gold, the sea below glows faintly in response, as if remembering the day compassion defied gravity and pulled a soul back from the fall.